Yo. Jesus will fix it. Bro. Yeah. I'm not. You're leading Encourage My Soul, right? All right. I got it. All right, bet. Who? What, who? I don't know who that is.
All right, bro, go ahead.
I missed you.
I know.
I meant to get you Paul's sausages.
Hey, I've been eating so many
I know,
months.
Delaney told us.
I mean, yeah, sure. All right, if you want to do it, you got it.
All right, everybody, if you want to grab a seat, you don't need to sit on the outskirts. You can come right up front to these two sections right here. Fill up these two sections. We're going to get it going with a couple songs here before we jump on into the night.
There it is. You just gotta move that chair. Y'all be a little silly. I ain't sure no mic with you. I try to spit in your mouth, nasty.
Troubles come my way.
Troubles come my way.
Gotta pray sometime.
Gotta pray sometime.
Troubles come my way.
Troubles come my way.
Gotta pray sometime.
Gotta pray sometime.
But you know that my Jesus.
Jesus will fix it.
Know that my Jesus.
My Jesus will fix it.
Know that my Jesus.
My Jesus will fix it.
In a while.
In a while.
Trouble comes my way.
Troubles come my way.
Gotta fight sometime.
Gotta fight sometime.
Troubles come my way.
Troubles come my way.
Gotta fight sometime.
Gotta fight sometime.
Don't you know that my Jesus?
My Jesus will fix it.
Don't you know that my Jesus?
My Jesus will fix it.
Don't you know that my Jesus?
My Jesus will fix it.
In a while.
In a while.
Troubles come my way.
Troubles come my way.
Gotta cry sometime.
Gotta cry sometime.
Troubles come my way.
Troubles come my way.
Gotta cry sometime.
Gotta cry sometime.
Don't you know that my Jesus?
My Jesus will fix it.
Don't you know that my Jesus?
My Jesus will fix it.
Don't you know that my Jesus?
My Jesus will fix it.
In a while.
In a while.
Troubles come my way.
Troubles come my way.
Gotta sing sometime.
Gotta sing sometime.
Troubles come my way.
Troubles come my way.
Gotta sing sometime.
Gotta sing sometime.
But don't you know that my Jesus?
My Jesus will fix it.
Don't you know that my Jesus?
My Jesus will fix it.
Don't you know that my Jesus?
My Jesus will fix it.
In a while.
In a while. Yeah, let's pop off. All right, we're going to sing Encourage My Soul. Encourage my soul and let us journey on. For the night is dark and I am far from home. Thanks be to God, the morning light appears. The storm is passing over, over. The storm is passing over, over. The storm is passing over. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. The storm is passing over, over. The storm is passing over, over. The storm is passing over. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Amen. Take these away.
You may go ahead and be seated. Thank you so much for leading those songs, campus. Welcome, everybody. Good evening. How are we doing? It's been a long Friday, but it's so great to be together tonight. If you don't know who we are, my name is John, and this is my lovely wife, Delaney. And we're excited to be here tonight. Tonight kicks off our mental health workshop. You know, it's good to see so many people in the house. You know, we've got some teens in the house. Come on, let's go representing for the teen. Come on, bro. We got some campus in the house. Let's go. We've got some young professionals in the house. Come on. And then we've got some other groups. All right, some other groups in the house. Can we make some noise? Amen. But it's good to see so many of us here tonight. You know, tonight we kick off our first session of our mental health workshop, and it's going to be led by none other than the Shapiros. And so, yes, we've got Mike and Mary Shapiro, who are going to be discussing a variety of things with us this weekend. But tonight, they'll be speaking on the concept of stress and how we can learn how to handle stress in our lives biblically. And come on, like, right? Amen. Like, we all need that. We all feel the weight of, you know, just the things that we've got going on in our life, the weight of stress. And so what better than to look at God's word to see, man, how do we handle this stress in our lives? And you may be wondering, man, like, who are the Shapiros? Right? Who are the Shapiros? So Delaney's going to talk to us and share with us who the Shapiros are.
So the Shapiros are joining us from Apex, North Carolina, which is cool. That's the town I grew up in, so that's fun. They are highly educated and just really experts in this area, I feel like. So I'm just really excited to get to learn from them tonight. But Dr. Michael Shapiro currently serves as the director for behavioral medicine at Duke Medical School's Southern Regional Area Health Education Center. That sounds like an important job. And is a member of the faculty there, helps with training and education of the physicians in their residency program. And he also provides clinical service to the patients in the family medicine clinic and at the Cape Fear Valley Hospital. So lots of experience there in education and also in just clinical work. And then Dr. Mary Shapiro is the director of the ADHD clinic at the same facility and specializes in the diagnosis and treatment of ADHD. Behavior disorders, and other childhood conditions. And prior to moving to North Carolina, they were in private practice in Athens, Georgia, and they served with children in predominantly rural and underserved areas, and both completed PhDs in educational psychology at the University of Georgia. Go Dogs! And interned in the Department of Neurology at the Medical College of Georgia, and they have lectured together extensively abroad and in the U.S. On topics in child psychology, marriage, parenting, adoption, and mental health across the Christian context. So we are just so lucky to get to learn from them tonight and for the rest of the weekend. We're really excited that you're here and glad that we get to hear you share.
Amen. So before they come up here, we're going to say a quick word of prayer, and then we're going to welcome them as they come up to share with us tonight. So let's bow our heads. Father, we thank you that we were all able to make it here safely tonight. God, thank you so much for the Shapiros and for bringing them here to Charleston, Father, to teach us on such a subject that so many of us, God, we just want to know how to be righteous, Father. We want to know how to give our lives to you while in the midst of dealing with mental health issues, while in the midst of dealing with things like depression, like stress and anxiety. And so we are so thankful to have not only educated men and women, but disciples who can come and to teach us what it looks like to deal with these things that we battle on a day in and day out basis biblically. So I just thank you so much for them being here. I pray that you be with us tonight. Father, I pray that all of us could soak up all that they have to teach us, that we can take notes, that we can turn our ears to them, Father, and really listen, not only with our ears, but with our hearts, Father. So please be with us tonight, Father. We love you. We pray this in your name. Amen.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. We are so glad to be talking to teens and campus people first because you're so much more forgiving. And everyone's saying, like, oh, we're so lucky to have the Shapiros here. You don't know that yet. We might do a terrible job. And by the end of this, you're like, why did we have them? So, I appreciate the good forward advanced press, but, So tonight we're going to talk about stress management for college and teens. I don't know about you yo pros, you don't have stress, I presume, so, you know, you can just ride this one out. And then there's some people I'm looking at that probably don't qualify for young professionals, but hopefully you'll hear something too as well. I'm just saying. This is the main, I know you can't read this maybe, but this is the main hint we have for you today to manage stress. It's very simple. You bang your head there when you're stressed out, okay? If you're still, you follow the directions in the circle. If you're still feeling stressed out, you repeat that step again. If you end up unconscious, then you cease the activity immediately because, you know, any treatment, too much of any treatment is really bad. So that's all we have to say, and thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, just do that. I do want to take this opportunity to begin with a very serious case. What happens if you don't listen to us tonight and you don't do everything you can as a campus student to manage your stress? So I'm going to show you a little case study we have here. Clayton, next slide. Yeah, so due to HIPAA rules, we can't actually name the patient. We'll give her an alias. We'll call her Schmalix Bowman. This is what happens. I mean, if you let this stuff go off the rails and too much stress, you don't do something. Do you want to look like this? Do you want this to happen to you? That's, she is beautiful. And that is nice to say about the handicapped, to encourage them. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Actually, you might wonder who those other girls are with her. Those are my eldest daughter and my daughter-in-law. So they were, yeah, they're equally stressed out and insane. But they were besties all through college, right? Isn't that what it was? So, yeah. So if you don't want this to happen to you, just listen to us tonight, do everything we say, and you won't end up, you know, like so. Yeah, we had to have an incriminating Alexandra picture. Oh, there will be more to come. I'm just letting you know. Next slide, please. So, who is stressed out? Raise your hand. Yeah. If you're not raising your hand right now, you're a liar. Because the statistics say you're a liar. So, yes, this is a very small study here of not many people, but I just like the graphics, so I decided to use it. According to this, if you're not stressed out, you're somehow managed to slip in below this 70%. Actually, 84% of college students claim to be stressed out. The rest of them are just faking it or putting on a good face or whatever. 70% of college students receive less than the recommended 8 hours of sleep. Yeah, right. Not now. Some of you are saying 8 hours. I don't even remember. I haven't seen 8 hours of sleep since I was like an infant. But, you know, and certainly not in college. But that's the recommended. We're going to talk about that later, the importance of sleep and getting enough sleep. There's a little graphic there about the bad things campus students do to cope with stress. Alcohol being the 67% stripe, yeah, so, and food being the, I think it's the 18%, tobacco being the blue 10%, but not in this room, of course. I don't know. So if you're saying you're not stressed right now, you're totally, like I said, you're either not telling the truth or you're beating these statistics. So I'm impressed, and you don't have to do anything. Don't forget, not only does this apply to normal college students during normal times, but what about this next slide, Clayton? Open question. So you had stress as a college student. Then this pandemic happens. Some of you never had college without the stress of the pandemic. So open question, just shout it out. How has COVID changed your life or added to stress? Yes, it has, okay? We've established that. It definitely has. How? Isolation, right? You used to be able to hang out all the time, and then all of a sudden things were locked down or you had to wear a mask, so isolation.
Just more aware of
Yes, being anxious, that's right. When people are getting sick all around you and you're like, oh, wait a minute, I'm a college student, but I'm not immortal. I won't live forever. I might get sick. What a concept. Yeah, and then it's staring you right in the face with the pandemic. How else? Oh, Alex.
I think it used to be that, you'd have a day off and people couldn't reach you, but now you're expected to show up at a computer. Like you always are accessible to people.
Right. Oh,
Jobs
good
and
point.
School, all the time you're accessible.
Oh, good point. You used to be able to stay homesick, but now it's like you're home and you're sick. Too bad. You're still going to work from home. Yeah, you still have to do stuff. Can you think of anything else? All right, let's poll. What's the game show where they poll the audience? Family Feud. So let's see what the audience says about how COVID changed your life. So fear of exposure, right? We said that. Not only you, but your family, right? So you're worried about people that might be miles away, your elderly grandparents or your brothers, sisters, children, grandchildren, whatever. Social isolation, sometimes from your own family. Next, feelings of helplessness. Like early in the pandemic especially, right? No one knew what was happening. No one knew how big of a threat this was. All you knew was you couldn't do anything about it. We didn't have any tools in the kit to fight it. So there was a lot of despair and helplessness. Mary and I saw it in our clinic. Next one. Oh, thank you. Disruption of normal routine, like working from home. And it's interesting, we saw a lot of parents who used to say, one bad thing about me working so much is I never get to see my kids. And then the pandemic hit and they all get quarantined at home. They're like, I can't wait to get rid of my kids. I've got to get out of here and work somewhere else. So everything was disrupted. Schools were closed. You were working from home. And this one's big. The things you used to do that were fun for stress management, you couldn't do for a while. You couldn't go to the gym. Our gyms have only just now opened up. You couldn't go on trips. People weren't traveling. Is there another one on this? No, that's it. So once again, not only do you have normal stress associated with being a college student or a high school student or a YoPro, you throw in a global pandemic. It did not make things any easier, right? So next slide. We're going to talk about stress tonight, but not all stress is bad. Did you know that? There's two kinds of stress. There's what's called distress, which is the one you usually think of, which is the bad one. When something bad is happening and it stresses you out. But then there's also something called eustress, which is being stressed out about good things, like someone's getting married and you have to plan for the wedding, or you're going on vacation. When we were in private practice and our kids were little, they used to, if I took some time off at all, our kids would ask Mom, why is Dad so stressed out? We're going to Disney World or something like that. It's because preparing for it was so miserable and having to get everything taken care of is like, I don't even want to go anymore. So there's certain kinds of stress that are good, a graduation or something coming up like that, or a Christmas holiday coming up, right? Yes. So those are, but it's still stress, right? Yeah. So you have eustress and you have distress. They both do kind of the same thing. And we sort of pretend like the eustress things isn't stressful, but it is stressful. So if you're planning for something fun, or you're planning a campus activity or something like that, and you say, why am I feeling stressed? But I don't want to show it because it's supposed to be a happy thing. No, it's still stress. If you don't manage stress, it becomes chronic stress, which means stress that doesn't go away. If you don't stop it at that point, it becomes mental illness, like a full-blown anxiety disorder or depressive disorder. If you don't stop it there, you go insane, and then you die. So I left that square off, that it escalates from stress, chronic stress, mental illness, and then you go insane and you die. I just didn't want to, I didn't want to put that on because I didn't want to, stress you out or make you feel mad. So tomorrow, we're going to go into a lot of detail about the different mental illnesses. So we're going to skip a lot of that tonight about mood disorders and anxiety disorders, stuff like that. Come tomorrow and you'll hear all that. What we'll talk about tonight is how do we intervene at the stress point so none of that worse stuff happens. Next slide. Step one, and this You can't do, so Mary and I still do a lot of clinical work. We see a lot of patients. If they're not disciples, if they're not God-fearing, faithful people, they're gonna miss out on this whole slide. This is one resource, one source of help they can't avail themselves of. When we were doing a lot of, in the midst of the pandemic, we were getting called by a lot of churches to do, stress in the pandemic era. What do we do about it? Step one, then and now, is remember who's in charge when you're getting stressed out and you feel like it's all on you and you have nowhere to go and no one to help you. Remember who's in charge. So next will be a bunch of scriptures. In him we've obtained an inheritance, having been predestined according to the purpose of him who works all things according to the counsel of his will. God's got this. Whatever's happening to you now was meant to strengthen your faith. You got that? Yes, you're stressed out, but in the life of a Christian, that has a purpose. It's meant to deepen your faith. Next one. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny, and not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father? But even the hairs on your head are all numbered, which for me, and Bob, for example, is easier than others, but I'm not going to say that. Fear not, therefore, you're of more value than many sparrows. Keep that in mind when you're like, why is this happening to me? This doesn't seem to be happening to anyone else. Why is this happening to me? God's got this. God's got you. He knows you. He knows every hair on your head. You're more valuable than even sparrows falling from the trees. For by him all things were created, including the coronavirus, by the way, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, microscopic, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him, and he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. When you feel like saying, I'm falling apart, all things he holds together. Next one. The lot is cast into the lap, but every decision is from the Lord. You think you're making all these plans and decisions. God will guide you as long as you stay faithful in prayer and connected to your church community. We'll talk to that in a little bit. God's got this. Every decision he's overseeing. He lets you make mistakes and he lets you, but he's got you is the point I'm trying to make. Next one. I know that you can do all things and that no purpose of you can be thwarted. That's Job said that as he's losing, kids are dying and he's getting sick and his house is collapsing, right? That's some stress. Next one. Who has spoken and it came to pass, unless the Lord has commanded it? Is it not from the mouth of the Most High that good and bad come? Once again, bad has a purpose. Bad is to strengthen your faith. God won't let you get past the point where you're irretrievable if you stay in him. I form the light and create darkness. I bring prosperity and create disaster. I, the Lord, do all these things. We don't always understand what's going on. We're stressed out in our own little lives, and then we pick up our heads, and there's the political situation and climate change and international warfare and all kind of things. He brings prosperity. He creates disaster. All you got to remember is he's overseeing all this. He's sovereign. I'm going to talk about that on Sunday. So that is point one of stress management. I can't say this to non-Christians. I can't say this to my patients. You know, it's against ethics that a mental health professional imposes their worldview onto a patient. So I'm not allowed to say this to a patient unless they bring it up. And they say, well, Dr. Shapiro, what's the role of faith? Oh, now we have a door we can talk. So what I'm saying is you've got something that the rest of the world doesn't. And that bodes well for your prognosis when you're stressed out, depressed, or anxious. So keep that in mind. Next one. This concept of resiliency, this is something I talk a lot about with my, it was, Delaney mentioned that part of my job is to train young physicians. So these are physicians that just got out of medical school, now they got to do 3 years of a residency. And it's really, really, really hard work. And for the first time, they have life and death responsibilities over people, and they're writing prescriptions, and they're caring for people. And people are dying, and people are getting sick, and sometimes they make mistakes, and it's awful. And they get depressed, and they get anxious a lot. So we talk a lot about resiliency. Resiliency is the ability to struggle well. It's not the absence of struggles. It's the ability to struggle well. It includes lots of individual and environmental factors. So hope and optimism, that's a thing you can work on. Self-efficacy, that means, that's a fancy word for I feel like I do have the ability to improve my lot. I don't have to just lie there like, oh my goodness, this is all happening, I can do nothing about it. Emotional intelligence, and most importantly, like I mentioned before, social support, which comes from your church community. Resiliency does not mean accomplishing every goal, especially in conditions like this with COVID. So you can be resilient, you can not meet your goals. You get what I'm saying? Things might go off the rails, or you fail a test, or you decide this major isn't for me, or something like that. And things can go off the rails, and you don't accomplish goals, but that doesn't mean you're not capable of being resilient. Resilience is struggling well when stuff like that happens. It does mean persevering even when things get difficult. Once again, trials for a disciple deepen your faith. Suffering, because sometimes I know as college students and high school students and YoPros, you feel like you're suffering. Suffering brings you closer to Jesus. We'll talk about that more tomorrow. Now, let's get to the nerd stuff. Next slide. I love this stuff. So I'm a neuropsychologist. That means I specialize in the neurological bases of behavioral and emotional disorders. That's my thing. So I can talk about the brain all day. In fact, let's just settle back. I won't give you a whole neuroanatomy lesson. You've heard of if you've taken like biology 101, you've heard of the fight or flight response, right? So what I'm going to show you now is the biological reason for stress. So this is what happens. The brain, that's that wrinkly thing at the top, perceives a threat, right? Let's go back to caveman days. You know, you're a caveman, and here comes a saber-toothed something or other, and there's this threat. So your brain sends a message to your pituitary gland, which is this little thing dangling down right in the middle of your brain. The pituitary gland squeaks out a hormone that tells your adrenal gland, which sits on top of your kidney, to squeeze out more hormones, specifically adrenaline and cortisol, right? Which you've heard of. So these are stress hormones. Stress hormones then flow through your vascular system, flow through your bloodstream. The purpose of these stress hormones is to get your body ready to either fight the threat or run away from it, right? So your muscles get tense, your stomach motility slows down, your pupils dilate, you start breathing heavy, you start sweating, right? So in caveman days, then they would wrestle the saber-toothed alligator or whatever it is. Or they'd run away from it, or they'd freeze. That's another thing. Now, the physical activity of running away from the thing or fighting it dissipates that cortisol, that stress hormone. That's how you get rid of it. You fight the thing or you run away, and by that physical exertion, all those stress hormones go away. Now, flash forward to the current 21st century. What threats do you encounter now that we don't have saber-toothed alligators and stuff? It's a boss that's coming down on you. Or, oh my goodness, don't even get me started on traffic. Traffic is my biggest pet peeve, especially when people get in front of you in the passing lane and they go slower than everyone else. Anyone with me on that? Thank you. Thank you so much, because my wife has to correct me periodically, like every hour, about losing my Christianity over driving. So that's exactly what happens. These stress hormones are coursing through our bodies. But what can we do? Much as I would like to get out and go up to that car in front of me and roll down their window and give them a little talking to about not being in the passing lane, or if your boss is coming down on you, you want to punch them in the face, or you want to get away from this situation, we can't do that. We're civilized human beings. So yeah. So what do? We just suck it in. We stamp it down. We do what 21st century people do, which is bury it. Bury it deep. Bury those feelings. Smush them down. Compact them deep into the lower part of your body so that they don't come back. But it doesn't work that way. The cortisol is still running through your body, And cortisol is damaging to the pericardial tissue. That's why people drop dead of a heart attack from stress, because cortisol damages the heart muscle. So we got to do something about this cortisol when we feel stressed out, which we'll talk about in a minute. A lot of people have heard of cortisol. What you don't hear about so much is oxytocin. Have you? Yeah. Oh, good. That's right. That's right. So we don't talk much about that. That little hormone makes you, so cortisol makes you fight or flight. Oxytocin, they call it what do they call it? The tend and defend. It makes you maternal, and it makes you gather your chicks, under your wing, and it makes you care for people, other people. So we don't talk much about that, but you have to deal with that hormone as well. So the next step, next slide, is connection with others. So that's how you deal with the oxytocin. That's how you deal with the maternal, loving feelings that are secreted when you have stress. You connect with other people. Now, I know, especially during COVID, that was really difficult, but you know what God gave us? Zoom. God gave us Zoom. And God gave us WebEx. And God gave us all those other things. Delaney's dad is very happy about the Zoom, Yes, so we know that. So maintain a connection. You can't handle stress alone. You know why you do handle stress alone? You know why you choose to handle it alone? You ever hear of the imposter syndrome? Yes. Right. So with my young physicians that I train, they are all eat up with imposter syndrome. They think if they show any weakness, they already think they're the dumbest intern or resident, but they don't want to show it, because if they show any weakness, they won't be good physicians or we won't like them. So they just keep it to themselves, and they end up thinking, I must be the stupidest person in the room, and it goes all off the rails. You can't handle this alone. And I promise, if you call someone and you say, I am really stressed out about this midterm, irrationally stressed out, much more so than I should be, have you ever felt like that? Your brother or sister is not going to say, no, no, I have no clue what you're talking about. Yeah. Alexandra, it took her about 10 years to get through college because of some challenges, but she had a good network of people supporting her. I guess it just seemed like 10 years because she was always at our house for some reason, so I don't know. So, support each other. Maintain a connection. Don't think you have to go through this alone, and definitely don't think you're the only person that's ever gone through this, because you are so not. Everyone, you can look at each other and like, oh yeah, that person's been totally stressed out as much as I do. They just handle it better, or they put on a better mask. I don't know. Next slide. So here's some other stuff to do. I'll have to read that for you. This is some research early in the pandemic. We health nerds get right on this stuff. So the pandemic comes out, we're like, ooh, how are people dealing with stress? What are they doing? What are the things that they're doing that are most beneficial? So there's this place, the Center for Evidence-Based Medicine. That is not a misspelling. This place is in England. And I guess in England, they spell center differently. So here is some stuff, some research during the pandemic about pandemic-related stress that still applies now. So the first thing that they found that works real well is minimize the amount of media exposure. So remember when the pandemic first happened and there was all this confusing, conflicting information coming out, and people didn't know who to listen to, and they're kind of listening to everyone and freaking out. And I'm like, just don't do it. Just turn it off. Now, you have to stay informed, so just do this for maybe an hour a day. Now, if you're using some, I don't know, social media thing, Twitter or Facebook or one of them things, I don't know what they are. If it's freaking you out, if the stuff you're looking at is freaking you out, here's an idea. Don't look at it anymore. Maybe an hour a day. Go ahead and give it an hour a day, but limit yourself, okay? Media exposure has very toxic. I'm going to talk about this a little tomorrow. I love listening to the news, and I have a 70-minute commute every day. I'd listen to the news the whole way because I love getting upset about things I can't control. But Mary makes me, she rides with me 2 days a week. She allows me one news cycle. Then I have to turn the channel. So I'm like, yeah, but what? I'm going to miss something. She said, they're just repeating the same news every half hour. And I'm like, well, yeah, but I don't know. So we listen to something else. So limit media exposure. Use trusted sources for health information. The only trusted source in my mind is CDC. Nothing but love for them. Love them. Connect with friends and family. We talked about that online or via telephone. Help and support others in the community. Oh, here's maybe some of you don't even know what that is, or a lot of you take yoga and stuff like that, right? Oh, okay. I'm glad to hear it. Because I really like yoga, but I'm the one that always falls asleep during it, or I get... Is it? The problem is, I can't wear the tights, you know, and feel good about my body. You know what I'm saying? So there are other things you can do. There are other forms of meditation and mindfulness. Mindfulness is a concept in psychology, and we'll talk about this more later, where you focus on the here and now. You don't worry about things in the past because they're already done. Can't do anything about that. You don't worry about things in the future. Can't do anything about that. It's not here yet. It's a way to get your mind focused on the here and now. Yoga does that if you can stay awake. It's a beautiful mindfulness activity. I came up with this really short, if I can read it, I called it Stop. I invented it. Yeah, I did. This is a brief mindfulness and meditation thing you can do. It's called Stop. So S, stop. So when you feel yourself starting to get anxious, stop, that's number one. T, take a few deep breaths. You yoga people are all into the breathing and how important that is, right? In through your nose, out through your mouth. Breathing, huh? Oh, not, okay, some of you yoga people are really into this. Have you ever heard of square breathing? Yes, so listen, this is gonna sound hokey, but all the research robustly supports breathing when you're trying to de-stress in the middle of an anxious moment. Square breathing is when you 4 seconds in, hold it for 4 seconds, 4 seconds out, hold it out for 4 seconds, 4 seconds in. That's all it is. 4 seconds, square. So stop, do a few of your square breaths. Observe your body. Where am I tensing up here? Where's the cortisol? What part of my body is this affecting that I'm getting anxious right now? With me, it tends to be right there in between my shoulder blades. I get this knot right there. So where am I tensing up? Okay, just relax. Just focus on relaxing. And P, proceed. Now ask yourself, what can I do right at the moment to make this better? If it's nothing, accept it. If I can do nothing about this right now, all right, I'm going to have to live with that. And if that makes you anxious, go back to the step where you're doing square breathing and do the whole thing again. So stop. This is a brief mindfulness and meditation thing that I invented, and I will charge you $2 each on your credit card for giving you that. No, I won't do that. Yeah, every time. Yeah, residuals. Yeah, every time you use it. Look after your body, eat healthy, implement sleep hygiene. We'll talk about that in a second. Importance of a schedule. I know you guys hate schedules. And I know it's hard to keep a schedule because your classes change every semester, right? But in so much as it is in your ability to do things consistently, physiologically, it's really good for you. to get up at the same time, regardless of when your first class is, to go to bed at the same time, regardless of when your first class is, to reserve this hour to this hour for exercise, to reserve this hour to this hour for studying. Now, you might be like, oh, I'm so bad at being organized like that. If you have to write it down, it's really going to feel very freeing to you, where you're not, what do I do now? You know, and then you end up playing Call of Doo-Doo or something like that. So, yeah. So keep a schedule, even if you think you don't need it. It's super important. Avoid unhealthy coping strategies like alcohol, smoking tobacco, and taking drugs. This is an interesting aside. I was curious about, you've heard some research about, since the pandemic, how alcohol use has gone up and has become the drug of choice for self-medication. It's not anything else anymore, it's booze. So I did some research on how much increase of sales per different kind of booze had happened since the pandemic. Check this out. Tequila up 75%. 75%. I know, I had the same reaction, but then I was like, oh wait, I'm not supposed to say that. Wine up 66%. And I believe Alexandra's mother and my wife probably contributed to that, because they have this, oh, okay. They have a happy hour group. Go there. Canned cocktails. I don't even know what that is. What is a canned cocktail? Like what? Well, whatever they are, 93% increase in sales of those, whatever they are. Corona beer, I thought this was funny. Corona beer went up 50%. Why do you think that's ironic? Because of the coronavirus. And I thought, wow, this is going to kill Corona sales, but whatever, 50% increase. Online sales of booze went up 243%. 243%. 243. That's more than 100%. Significantly more than 100%. So people been drinking. They've been medicating themselves. So avoid these counterproductive coping skills. And lastly, do activities you'll enjoy, which we'll talk about more in a minute. Oh yeah, my wife is here too. We should probably let her speak. So I'm going to let Mary yell at you for a minute.
So now you know why I have to be within kicking distance. Now you know, okay? Yeah. And Alexandra knows better than to put a Shapiro behind the microphone, so that's all on her. That's all her, yeah. All right, let's talk about some practical stuff. Next slide, how is your diet? All right, I'm gonna get personal here, okay? Here's what we tend to do. We all know what we're supposed to be doing with our diet, right? More whole foods, less processed foods, less sugar, less salt. Fast foods, that's all bad. All of that is bad right there, okay? Fruits and vegetables, you know, we know what we're supposed to be doing. But we think of it as, so I look good at the beach this summer, right? It's so much more than that. It is so much. I'm on like my 4th workshop about treating mental health disorders with nutrition. Okay, so we don't think about what is it doing to my brain. Now I'm looking at the room, and this side of the room that most of us are some years on us, we know about this stuff, all right? Because we know we've already paid for some of this stuff, right? Okay, your side of the room over there, you're thinking, that doesn't bother me. You know, when I was in college, I lived on leftover pizza and ramen noodles. Do they still have ramen noodles? Okay. Because that's what I could afford. That's what I could afford, all right? But it takes a toll on you is what I'm telling you, and it takes a mental toll on you. You know, if you are drinking 8 caffeinated drinks a day, you're going to feel anxious. I guarantee it, all right? Just because of what you're putting in your body. So here's, you know, like I said, I've been studying, you know, how this affects our brains and all this stuff, and it gets overwhelming sometimes. I mean, you look at some of these diets. Has anybody looked at Whole30? You know, basically you eat lettuce leaves and carrots and, I think that's about it. It gets overwhelming, but change the one thing you need to change is what I would encourage you to do. Change one thing. And again, it's not just about physically how you look. It is about keeping yourself healthy and being able to function better. In 1 Corinthians 6, we are told your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit. And that's talking about, in that context, it's talking about avoiding sexual immorality. But the principle is God cares about what you do with your body. He cares about how you treat your physical body. If you're dealing with something like, which we're not going to talk about much this weekend, because it's way beyond the span of what we can do, but if you're dealing with something like an eating disorder, you need to get help. These are very serious disorders. You need to get help, and you need to tell somebody what's going on, and you need to get the help you need to work through it, So don't take this stuff for granted, is what I'm telling this side of the room. This side of the room's already figured it out a little bit, all right? We've been to some of those doctor's appointments, all right? I'm telling you, young people, this is super important, all right? So treat yourself well with your diet. The next thing we need to talk about is exercise. Michael was talking about the fight and flight response, and the way you get rid of that cortisol in a healthy way is exercising. That's what you do. There's all this research on the importance of regular physical exercise. It reverses the effects of stress at a cellular level. Complicated physical activity increases growth factors in the brain and may ward off dementia. It increases your learning capacity, all right? What I tell, when I see children who are having trouble in school, one thing I tell their parents is make sure they're getting outside and they're physically active, all right? Because they're going to do better in school if they're physically active on a regular basis. Exercise, it produces endorphins, which are natural painkillers. We talk the runner's high, right? Which I never ran far enough to get the runner's high. But it's out there somewhere ahead of me. But I've done other things. But I'm talking about regular exercise. You've done it. I hope you've done it anyway, where you've had a really, really bad day. And you think, if I don't get out and take a run, or if I don't get on the elliptical, or if I don't go play tennis, I'm just going to come apart. And you feel so much better afterwards. But that has to be built into your schedule. And what we do a lot of times is we say that, especially when you're in college or in a demanding job, if I have time, then I'll do it, all right? It's got to go on the absolutely I must do it. And again, this is for how you function mentally and emotionally, not just how you're doing physically. So what and how much? 30 minutes of anything that's moderately vigorous 3 to 4 times a week is what's recommended. When I would see people in my office for depression and anxiety, that was the first homework assignment they got. Figure out how to exercise 30 minutes 3 to 4 times a week. Because the next one, burning 350 calories 3 times a week, is as effective for treating mild to moderate depression or anxiety as a prescription antidepressant. Read that one again, all right? You can treat mild to moderate depression and anxiety with exercise alone. And it is always a supplement, always a supplement. Like I said, that was my first homework assignment. We talked about this already. It has got to be a priority. You have got to figure out how to put it in your schedule. Yes, I remember college. I was in college for a long time. I remember college, all right? Busy schedules with lots of work to do. It's got to be in there somewhere. You've got to figure out how to put it in there somewhere.
Let me add one thing about exercise. Next slide, please. Once again, there was a point on there, complicated physical activity. Let me explain what that is. Physical activity is being on the elliptical or the bicycle or something like that. Complicated physical activity is any physical activity you do where you engage your brain as well. So a competitive sport, tennis is a great example because you're being physical, but you're also strategizing. Dance, martial arts, there's one of my martial arts bros. So anything where you're engaging your mind at the same time, strategizing, but also wearing yourself out physically, that's the best kind of thing. Now, the point of this slide, and I'll read parts of it for you, is it doesn't have to be a big deal. We are saying move it up the priority list from the when I get time, or this is a luxury, to the I must do this every day, or at least 3 times a week. But it doesn't have to be a big, complicated gym membership thing. This article I found says it can be as simple as just a few minutes, says blah, 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 professor of blah, blah, blah. In a study with kids, taking short breaks of 2 to 3 minutes improved mood and blood sugar levels. After they did their short breaks, they felt better. They weren't as grumpy. While its physical impacts might take a while to set in, studies show that the brain reacts immediately to exercise. It stimulates the creation of mitochondria, which produce ATP, a chemical that converts energy, giving us more stamina. Endorphins, which are released even more in high-intensity exercise, can leave us feeling euphoric. So what I'm telling you is, if you can't go to the gym or blah, blah, it doesn't have to be a big deal. You can do a brief, intense exercise thing, and you'll get the same benefit. For example, so there's some easy things. When you park somewhere, what do? You should park as far away as you can, so at least you get the walk up to the building. When you have to go up a floor, what do? Take the stairs. I'm going to use a colleague of mine as an example. The guy whose office is next to me, he has this thing about steps. He's obsessed with his little Fitbit and getting in a certain amount of steps, like 87 billion steps a day. And it's a little weird. He'll get up in the middle of a meeting and start pacing, you know, or you're in the middle of a conversation and he'll go like, oh, wait, hang on just a second. And then if you want to talk to him, you got to follow him while he's going around the building. But he does one thing that's really smart that I've adapted. Our building is 3 floors. If he has to go from the first to the second floor, he walks, takes the stairs, goes all the way up to the 3rd floor, and then down to the 2nd floor. Does that make sense? So you always go to the top floor, and then you go back down to wherever you have to be. And I was like, that's pretty smart. So I'm trying to talk to him while we're doing it. I'm like, what do you think about it? But eventually, you know, it'll get better. And you can be creative, too. You know, during the pandemic, when there were all these lockdowns and our gym was closed, Mary and I are like, well, now what do we do? Because we're very devoted to exercise. And we're looking around, and we live in a townhouse it's small and cozy. It's got a small footprint, but it's tall. It's three stories tall. And I'm like counting the steps. There are 31 steps from our garage to our bedroom. So we're like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to start doing stadiums. When I was in college, we called them stadiums. So we're going to do 6 sets of 5 up and down, and we're going to time ourselves and see if we can beat our time. And then we'll see if we can do another set. So for quite a while, we were doing these stadiums when we had no other choice. It's just be creative, and it doesn't have to be a complicated thing, and it doesn't have to take long. But let me ask you this. Do you think this comes easy? You know, I'm just saying it's worth it, right? You can tell. I'm just saying. But it doesn't have to be a big thing. So now Mary's going to talk about another sensitive subject.
Another one. Let's talk about sleep and rest. The sleep research says that between 35% and 50% of adults in the western part of the world get inadequate sleep. And inadequate sleep is considered anything below 7 hours a night. There's some individual variations for people, but 7 hours a night is where they start counting you as sleep deprived. And let me tell you what sleep deprivation results in. Sleep deprivation is associated with an increased risk of diabetes and hypertension. It's also associated with obesity. They think that when you're tired, you're super tired, you crave carbohydrates and sugar that are going to give you that little energy burst, you know, and so you end up putting on weight because you're eating those kind of food. The risk of stroke is 4 times greater in people that are sleep deprived. Listen to this one. Even you young people, listen to this one. There's an increased risk of death by accident when you're sleep deprived. When you are sleep deprived, your brain does what are called microsleeps, where you go to sleep for less than a second, just a second. But if you are going through that busy intersection when you go to sleep, then you have an accident. So the risk of death by accident increases when you're sleep deprived. Insufficient sleep is related to depression and increased cortisol levels. And especially tomorrow when we talk about disorders like bipolar disorder, sleep regulation is one of the biggest parts of treating something like a mood disorder like that, like bipolar disorder. Go ahead. You're going to do some of the specifics, right?
Yeah.
All right.
So one thing about the obesity, you have hormones that regulate your appetite. They're called ghrelin and leptin. They work at night while you're asleep. They regulate appetite. So that's why if you're sleep deprived, that's another reason you tend to gain weight if you're not getting enough sleep. The micro sleeps, it brought to mind when she was talking, my personal experience with this is when I was in graduate school, I had a internship. So we lived in Athens, and I had to go to Rome, Georgia, which is about 4 hours, and I had to be there. I had to leave at like 3 or 4 in the morning to get there in time to start my job. And I'd work all day, work, and then have to come home through Atlanta traffic, if you've ever been there. And there were times, honest to goodness, I remember what woke me up is my hands falling off the wheel and landing in my lap. And I'm like, okay, I'm good. You know, but 10 minutes later, it happens again. So these micro sleeps are very dangerous. I tell my patients when they're sleepless, I say, and we're going to talk about some sleep hygiene things, but I say your body's going to make you sleep whether you want to or not. So that's why you should work on it at night when it's supposed to be sleeping. Let's talk specifically about something with which all you high school and college students, and maybe even Yo Pros, know a lot about, and it's a tool that you can use very effectively. Next slide, napping. So, naps. It's been shown that there are countries that have siestas. Their productivity is higher. Their rate of accidents are lower. We should all have a nap in the middle of the day. I hereby vote that someone run for office and make that yes, I hereby declare that we all nap. However, you can't do it the way some of you do it, which is you nap all day. There are rules to napping, okay? Number one, and I talk to my residents about this, my medical residents, because they work these weird shifts. They do night float, which is when they're up all night, and they do these long 3-night shifts in a row. So I talk to them a lot about this. Your body works on a circadian rhythm. You've probably heard of that. It's the natural sleep-wake cycle, which runs at about 12 hours. So if you'll notice, if you're not sleeping well, in the day when you're doing the fighting to keep your eyeballs open, or you're nodding off at work, it's probably exactly 12 hours from when you were the most sleepless at night. So with me, it's like 3 in the morning, you know, so that means in 3 in the afternoon, that's when I'm really, you know, I've got to have a coffee or something like that to keep myself awake. So you try to build that into your nap schedule. So like 2 to 5 a.m. if you're working a night shift, or 2 to 5 p.m., because that matches your circadian rhythm. But it doesn't matter. If you can't do that, you just nap when you can. However, not more than 30 minutes. That's the rule. Not more than 30 minutes. If you nap for more than 30 minutes, you wake up, you know that feeling, you know, when you've napped for like 4 hours and you're like, why don't I feel better? And you have this brain fog. There's a term for that. It's called sleep inertia. Because when you nap too long, it disrupts the architecture of your sleep, the stages of sleep you go through, but not if it's just 30 minutes. So 30-minute naps, no longer, okay? Set your alarm, just 30 minutes, and you won't have the brain fog. It's called Hycom syndrome is another word for this sleep inertia. So short naps, long naps feel good, but they disrupt normal sleep architecture later. Now, let's talk about something really fun. Who's heard of this? Oh, okay, some of you know it, you do it. This is brilliant, this is genius. Let me tell you what a coffee nap is. So here's the principle behind a coffee nap. Coffee has many health benefits. Optimal, too much caffeine is bad. The optimal, if you go by milligrams of caffeine, it's about 3 cups a day is perfect in terms of antioxidant intake and keeping yourself alert. So coffee is a good thing. It's even fun, and it tastes good, and Starbucks is, we want to support Starbucks. And did you know, I forget, I looked up like what's the most expensive cup of coffee. Did you know that there's an animal, have you heard of this, called a civet, that they feed coffee beans, and the coffee bean goes through the civet's digestive system and they poop it out. And in that act, the coffee bean tastes like really, really good. Go figure. And they make coffee out of that, and it's like $700 a cup. So, whatever. Coffee is fun, and it's good for you in limited amounts. So, here's what a coffee nap is. Caffeine has a half-life of about 44 or 5 hours. So, it's in your system for about 4 or 5 hours. But it has a latency period. It takes about 30 minutes to 40 minutes to get there. So this is what you do. This is what a coffee nap is. You drink a cup of coffee and then take your nap. While you're napping, the little caffeine elves are going all through your bloodstream. When you wake up, that's when the caffeine kicks in. Then you got 4, maybe 5 hours. That's called a coffee nap. You're welcome for that, because it's a great thing. Yeah. No, because I don't think I invented that. Next slide. Here's some more nap hygiene or sleep hygiene. This is what we call sleep hygiene, which is how to make sleep work. You can't just sleep. You know, if you're having trouble sleeping, you can't just sleep. You got to work at it. You got to really work at it. So we already talked about nap at no more than 30 minutes. Next point. Yeah, right? So, this is what screens do. And don't do this, well, it's a blue light filter. It doesn't matter. Apple would like you to believe that matters. Any light stimulates the optic tectum, which is the part of your brain that tells it to wake up. So, no screens. No screens an hour before bed. This is super important for our little kid patients who are up, you know, playing whatever at all hours. No screens an hour before bed. Now you're wondering, well, what am I going to do? You might want to get one of those things, those leafy, yes, books. You might want to get one of those book things and read that. There's an idea instead of a screen. So no screens. Say what? It was probably an off-subject comment, right? Once again, a consistent sleep schedule, fixed time for going to bed, waking up. If you need to make changes, don't suddenly change this isn't working. I'm going to start getting up at 3 in the morning instead of 8 in the morning. It doesn't work that way. Change things in 1 to 2 hour increments, slowly, right? No alcohol. Alcohol helps you fall asleep quickly, but it also disrupts sleep architecture, so you don't get enough deep sleep. It'll knock you out fast, but you won't get good sleep, okay? So no booze. And no food either, because food increases metabolism. When you eat food, your body says, oh, we're gearing up to do something. We're ingesting energy to do something. This is a very hard one for me because I get really hungry right before bed. I had a nutritionist where I work say, you know why you get hungry right before bed? And I said, no, why? And she said, you're staying up too late watching Rick and Morty. And yeah, so she says your body thinks, if you stay up too late, your body thinks you're intending to resume your day. So it causes you to eat carbohydrates to get energy. So no food. This next one I'm very adamant about, the staying in bed. If you're anxious and you're lying in bed and you can't sleep and your eyes are open like this, what's going to happen? You're going to look at your clock, and you're going to say, oh, I got to be up in 6 hours. I got to get to sleep. Go to sleep. And then you're still not asleep, and you look over, and oh, no, now I only have 3 hours before I have to get up. And then you get panicky. Do you know what I'm talking about? Yes. So here's what you got to do. Don't stay in bed if you're not asleep. If you're not asleep, if you do stay in bed and you're awake, just like Pavlov's dog, you're going to associate sleeplessness with your bedroom. So eventually your bed and your bedroom is going to have the aura of a torture chamber, and you're going to go like, oh, it's sleep time again. I don't want to go back in there. Last night was so terrible. So if you're not asleep, get out of bed, go into another room, put on a low wattage light bulb, and read a book until you start feeling sleepy, then go and try it again. But don't lie there with your eyes wide open being nervous about why you're not asleep. That's the worst thing you can do. Once again, your body will make you sleep at some point, so it's not like, because sometimes you lie there and you're like, I'm never going to sleep again, ever in my life. I'll be sleepless. Yes, you'll go asleep, get to sleep. So just get up right now, go read a book, and then come back in. Pleasant sleep environment, believe it or not, the science says that 60 to 67 degrees is an ideal, because it makes your body think you're going to hibernate. So if you're married, this might cause a little trouble, I don't know. But cooler is better. Decrease ambient stimulation, blackout curtains. I tell this once again to my residents that are doing night shift. Don't let any light in, put blackout curtains, eye shades, earplugs, whatever you need. And my favorite, comforting Star Trek themed bedding, which to me, I like, now I can go to sleep. And this, I think Mary is big on this. Focus on rest, not sleep. If you can't sleep, okay, your body, like I said, will make you sleep. Just be restful. Mary does scriptures in her head when she can't sleep, or she, right? Or you, yeah. Or you can do your square breathing. There's another breathing called 4-7-8 breathing that Navy SEALs do. It's another, you can look it up, but it's another pattern breathing. So relaxation techniques, apps. There's a bunch of apps, right? Sleep aid apps. So you can do that as long as it's not on a screen. So that's proper sleep hygiene. Huh?
How do you do an app not on the screen?
Aren't there apps? Aren't they just audio? Like, can't you set them? Yeah, I knew that. Yeah. I don't know. I don't even know what an app is really completely yet. But next slide, please. This is another important thing to help you to keep from getting stressed out. Budget your week like you budget your money. You probably don't budget your money, but let's go past that right now. Budget your week. So I go over this with my young doctors. We actually count the number of hours they have in the week, and it actually is more than they think. So if you go to school for 80 hours a week, that leaves 88 whole hours left. Surprise. So think about how many hours a week do you allot to these activities: showering, getting dressed, transporting yourself, preparing and eating meals, sleeping, exercising, studying, socializing. You have a lot of things to budget into your schedule. You should really sit down with a calendar and budget these things into your schedule so that you're not cut adrift. It's very freeing to have a schedule. You think it's restricting, but it's actually very freeing when you don't have to wonder, what am I going to do next? And you end up doing something useless because you're ambivalent about what to do next. It's actually very freeing to be consistent and regular and have a routine that you stick to. Each of these activities you got to do, so budget them in there, write them in there. Like I said with our young physicians, I always say, you're going to exercise from this hour to this hour, come you know what or high water, you're going to do it. And after 2 weeks, when it becomes a habit, they're like, oh, this was easier than I thought. So put some thought into budgeting. The next slide is my favorite topic of stress management: hobbies. Mary says that I collect hobbies like postage stamps, and which is true, and they tend to vary pretty frequently, but I love hobbies. I know, forgive this graphic, not really sure what homie down here is doing. pretty sure you shouldn't do that. Well, someone said, no, he's looking through a telescope. Yeah, he's stargazing. I'm like, oh, thank you. That makes so much more sense. Eating, probably not a good hobby. Cricket, we did a workshop in South Africa once a few years ago, and I've always been interested in cricket, but I don't know anything about it. So I sat down. They were having a tournament. So I sat down with our host, and I said, I'm going to sit here for 3 days, because the tournaments go for like a week. You're going to teach me everything there is to know about cricket, so I finally understand it. 3 days later, I knew less than this about, I'm like, he's throwing the ball backwards. Can you do that? He's bouncing the ball, and they're catching it without a glove. What, you know, so don't do cricket as a hobby. It's just going to make you more stressed out. I picked this graphic because it has my two favorite things, which are motorcycling and martial arts. Yeah. So these are the two things I do, because when certain hobbies are very mindful. Remember we were talking about mindfulness. Pick a hobby that's mindful, not mindless, like playing a video game or watching YouTube or Netflix. A mindful, for example, motorcycling, yes, I know you can die and get killed and blah, blah, blah. However, while I'm riding, I am in the moment. You've got to be in the moment or else you're dead. I have to focus on what's going on, the traffic. Plus, there are all these experiences. You know, you can smell things and you see things better. So it's a very mindful activity. It helps me. Martial arts, for the hour you're doing it, all you can think about is how to not get punched in the nose, how to get this kick higher. So certain hobbies are very mindful. Cooking, ballroom dancing, Mary and I did for a long time. Yeah, so choose a mindful hobby and then don't let it go by the wayside. So my young physicians, I always say, what do you do for fun outside of medicine? They always say, well, I used to do blah, blah before medical school took up all my time. And I say, no. You have to be passionate about something that has nothing to do with this. And you have to build in time and put it up on the, I must do this for my mental and physical health. Go hiking, continue dancing, do martial arts, bicycling, whatever it is, and the more mindful, the better. So I'm a big emphasizing do one enjoyable thing a day. Lastly, next slide, please. Almost lastly, do you know what cognitive behavior therapy is? You've probably heard of it. Cognitive behavior therapy has become very popular for a couple of reasons. It's time limited, so unlike Freud's day, you're not going to be in therapy for the rest of your life, you know, sitting on the couch once a week for the next 30 years. It's very short and time limited, so insurance companies love it, and it teaches you a skill. And it really has very little to do with why you hate your mother and why you're afraid of snakes, you know. So the principle of cognitive behavior therapy is it's your thoughts that govern your emotions, not the other way around. So it's your thoughts that make you depressed. It's your thoughts that make you anxious, not the other way around. And usually those thoughts are erroneous. It's something you totally misinterpret, or there might be a million other explanations for it. Like if you're at work or school and you're walking down the hall and you see this friend of yours and you walk by and you go, hey, what's up? And they walk right past you. You could go, what's up with him? Well, that stinks. You know, he's probably still thinking about last week when I gypped him out of that quarter when we were playing, you know, and your mind starts building up this false narrative. It could be that he just, you know, he didn't hear you, or his dog just died, or he just found out. So there's a million other interpretations other than the erroneous thought that you have. CBT teaches you how to recognize those erroneous thoughts, and they come in different categories, and how to change it. So this is a good thing next time you feel anxious or depressed. Try to go back and rewind, and what thoughts am I having that might not be, like I got a low grade on this midterm. I'm the worst student in the world. I'm an idiot, and that makes you depressed. Well, are you really the worst student in the world? I mean, it's unlikely. There's probably, statistically speaking, you're probably not, you know. Does that make sense? So you find this erroneous thought and you correct it. When we were going through the pandemic, I made up a little CBT for myself about to not get anxious about the disease. So go ahead and scroll all of them. Stop. So I said, this is what I'm going to do. If I feel anxious about the pandemic, I'm going to ask myself first, okay, what's the worst thing that could happen? All right, I'm well into my 60s. I work in a medical clinic. I could probably get this and die. Okay, all right. I can accept that. That's the worst case scenario. But then force yourself to consider the best possible scenario. I'm going to be okay. The statistics are on my side. I'm reasonably healthy. I don't take a lot of medications. I'm surrounded by great medical care. All right? Then consider the most likely scenario. So worst case scenario, best case scenario, and the most likely one is I'll probably get infected someday, but the statistics are showing that with most adults, the symptoms are going to be mild. And then develop a plan for that. Okay, if this happens, I know where there's the nearest Doc in the Box. I've hoarded plenty of food. I have all my Star Trek DVDs, so I can, if I'm sick and stuck at home, I can watch them all and enjoy myself. So this is an example of cognitive behavior therapy. Think of the best case scenario when you're anxious about this test coming up. What's the worst thing that could happen? I'll fail this. What's the best thing that happened? I'll pass it with flying colors. What's the most likely thing? I'll probably get a mediocre grade. Is it going to affect my life in the long run? Not really. It just looks really important right now. It looks big right now. But let me develop a plan. You know, I'll study as hard as I can. I'll get some tutoring, and, you know, we'll see what happens. So that's an example of CBT, and that's something you can do. Now, Mary's going to close this out.
I'm just going to talk briefly about what do you do if you're doing all this stuff and you feel like your stress or your anxiety or your depression has gotten to a level where you need help. And we're going to talk about this pretty thoroughly tomorrow morning. But there's a couple of questions that we ask as professionals as to when does something go beyond, when does it become more abnormal? One is, how is it affecting your normal functioning? Are you still able to get up and go to school? Yes, I feel anxious, but I'm still able to go to school. And I've pretty much got it under control. I can do some things that make me feel less anxious. Or are you so anxious that I've skipped school for the last 3 days? I can't get, you know, or I'm so depressed I can't get up out of bed, all right? So how much is it affecting your normal functioning? That includes relationships. Is it affecting my relationships with other people? You know, has it been a week since I've talked to anybody? I'm just isolating myself all the time. The other one is, have the symptoms lasted for more than 3 months? You know, we all have funky weeks, right? I mean, we all have weeks where we're going, I've just been, the whole week has just been off, all right? But if you've consistently for 3 months been dealing with feelings that have been pretty problematic for you, then that's a red flag. And the last one is any kind of suicidal thinking, you know, behavior, plans, even passive things, and we're going to talk about this tomorrow in pretty good detail, like I wish I was never born, you know, I wish I just wasn't here anymore, okay? Though that is a red flag. Well, let me tell you, first of all, suicidal, if your depression or anxiety, if you have an issue like that, if it gets to a certain level, you will have suicidal thinking, all right? It just piggybacks on top of that mood disorder. So it's not something you decide to think about or you will to think about. It just is a red flag that tells you this is severe, all right? I have gone from it being a little problem to it being a big problem. It's time to get help. You know, and where do you get help? There are people that work in the mental health field have all kinds of letters after their names, all right? There are psychiatrists who are MDs. There are nurse practitioners who are psychiatric nurses. There are PhDs like Michael and I that are psychologists. There are licensed social workers. There are marriage and family therapists. There's a whole bunch of people out there, and they all do something different, you know. So if you're looking for help, first of all, you call whoever you're thinking about seeing, and you ask them, what do you, excuse me, what do you specialize in? All right? Because this field is way too big for you to be good at everything. Like I said, we're not going to talk about eating disorders a lot this weekend because we don't specialize in eating disorders. That's a very specific field. So if you've got an eating disorder, you want to find someone that specializes in eating disorders. If you are dealing with anxiety, you want somebody that knows how to do some of these techniques we talked about tonight. You know, do you do CBT for anxiety? And you call that person, excuse me, and apparently I'm allergic to something in Charleston as well. You call that person and you say, this is what I need help with. Is this something you can handle? And they're supposed to tell you, yes, this is something I do, or no, let me give you another name. Just so your college students know, most of your universities, most of the colleges and universities have mental health clinics that are attached to their health clinics, and those services are free to students, okay? Those are free services for students. So just like you would go to the health clinic if you get the flu, you can go to the mental health clinic and get help there. You want to add something?
Sure.
I'm
Well,
sorry.
you
Well,
choked to
Charles
death.
on something? Yeah.
Those university things are usually, they're called CAPS, Counseling and Psychiatric Services. So most state universities and most private universities have a CAPS. So you can call them, and even if they don't have a CAPS themselves, there's always a crisis line. Or, shameless plug here, if you look here at this link, Kidogo, that does all the videos, you know, for Disciples Today, came out and asked me to do 4 mental health related videos, and they're short. One of them has to do with how, if you're a Christian, how do you deal with a non-Christian? You know, you can't find a therapist that's Christian that sees things as the same way you do and might use the same spiritual tools. So then what do you do? So this little video tells you all about those letters, the different kinds of specialties, the letters after their names, what to expect, what to advocate for as you're seeking help and treatment. So, and be a good consumer. Because a lot of people will go see a therapist or counselor, psychiatrist or psychologist, and they kind of like, okay, I'll do whatever you say. And then they go along in therapy and they're like, I don't like this, or I don't think I'm making progress, or why is he doing this or not doing that? But they're afraid to challenge the big professional. Don't do that. You've got to advocate for yourself. If you are like, this isn't working, you say to your therapist, can we try something else? Or how do I know how I'm progressing? Or how long do you expect we're going to be in therapy? And then I tell people the therapy-patient relationship is a lot like a marriage. If you just don't feel chemistry with that therapist or counselor, it's not going to happen. So you got to find someone you like, that you feel is listening to you. So be a good consumer. Do smart things. So get on this. If you do Kidogo Shapiro, you'll get 4 of these things, and one of them says how to choose a non-Christian therapist or something like that. But so that's what you can do. Last slide. If you're overwhelmed, you have high-pitched squeals of desperation, constant haunted look, and no love life. So I'm so glad we could end on this encouraging, uplifting talk about suicide. That should just cheer you up and ready to go. So that's all we had prepared, but we are open if you have time. We can do some questions and answers, or well, questions anyway. I hope we can answer them. Any questions about anything we said? Please don't raise your hand and come up with well, I've been hallucinating for 2 days. We can't help you like that, but general questions and answers, we'd be happy to field. Anything? Okay, I'm sorry? All right, so if not, go put into practice the sleep thing, and we'll see some of you tomorrow. Thank you so much.